My name is Tom Colvin. I'm CTO of Aptora. Thank you very much for coming. It's very nice to see you all. I'm also a Google developer expert in Android, and my talk today is on designing with empathy. And here are the sort of key takeaways that I hope that you will get from this talk. We are going to talk first about empathy versus sympathy and why it's worth thinking empathetically, and how to think empathetically, how the thought process goes. And then the second part of this talk is just 3 examples of small changes that you can make to your app, but it is the small things that make a difference here. But more than these sort of 3 specific things that are key takeaways, I would like you to see them as examples of applying the thought process, so that hopefully you can go away and do the same yourself and get the benefit of empathetic thinking in your app. So I've used that word a number of times now. What's empathy? Well, generally empathy in UX is kind of about reducing user anxiety, because by reducing anxiety, we build trust with our users. So I hope that I will give you tools for making you a more empathetic designer, and the ability to think about where the anxieties in your own apps might arrive. And ultimately, I hope you can therefore produce apps that are more successful, and successful in whatever way you want to measure it, whether it's like raw number of euros, or number of users, or user retention, or anything like that. But they will hopefully be more successful because we want people to enjoy using them. Now, when we talk about anxieties, users don't start off, in fact, with anxieties. Anxieties start off as little questions, just little questions in users' heads. They only, in fact, turn into anxieties if those questions aren't answered by your UI. Let me give you some examples. So, the first slide promised scarecrows. Here is the app that we're going to be talking through. Our app allows a user to build a custom scarecrow. You can select the face, you can select the clothes, you can select the stuffing material, and then the scarecrow gets delivered to your door. Very, very important app. Those questions might be about the interface of that app. Do I lose my design if I close the app? Can I undo stuff without losing my work? When will a progress bar finish? You know, specific anxieties around something very, very situational in the moment. What about working offline? What about, are the charges that it's showing, are they things, are they full and complete, or am I going to be hit with hidden charges when I get to the checkout? What about an error? I just got an error message. Is that something I need to worry about? How do I cancel some ongoing operation? So those are interface type worries. You might have product type worries. The hat that I've designed for my scarecrow looks great here on the app, but is it really going to look like that when it gets delivered? Will the quality be good enough? You know, questions about quality, questions about the delivery, questions about the process of ordering and whether they're going to get that right. There might be questions about accessibility. Is it going to work with my screen reader? I have a particular color blindness. Is this going to show blue text on a green background or something like that? Will it support the text size I've chosen? Questions might be around security. Will I get spammed if I enter my email address? Is it safe to put my credit card in? Am I going to get tracked across the internet? Now, most of these are minor anxieties. And most of them, this is important, most of them are unvoiced. Nobody is going to write a support ticket to your company and ask this particular question. But they turn into anxieties if the user interface doesn't answer the question quick enough. Question, time, anxiety. So if we answer it quick enough, then it's good UX. UX in some ways is marked sort of negatively, a little bit like a driving test. You know, if you pass a driving test if you don't make enough, if you don't make a threshold of mistakes. And UX is a little bit, you know, if you don't make enough mistakes, then the UX, you know, a user is going to feel that the UX was good. These questions, by the way, these are just example questions, but the actual questions for your own apps will only come from user research. And in my experience, there is absolutely no substitute for sitting and watching a user whilst they navigate your app. So let's think about sympathy. A sympathetic approach would ask, you know, take one of these questions, for example. Will they get my order right? If we're being sympathetic to the user, we're sort of pitying the user. We're saying, okay, we understand that you're worried about that. And a sympathetic approach to dealing with that particular question, which might turn into an anxiety, might be one of messaging. We might want to say, if you've got an issue, hey, you can just phone us. You know, make our support front and center. We might want to say, it's okay, we only get a 1% failure rate. You've got a 99% chance of getting this right. We could say, we've got a full money-back guarantee. So if there's an issue, it's not going to cost you anything. Don't worry, we'll just pick it straight back up. And a UI that is associated with this UX, you know, this is ridiculous. I appreciate that this is ridiculous, but you know, here is a UI that says, order with confidence. 99% of our orders arrive exactly as we have specified. Now, horrific UI, but does it answer the UX question? Well, what we've done is we've been sympathetic to the user. And when we're sympathetic, we say, I feel for you. And being sympathetic is a good thing. It is, for example, where accessibility comes from. You know, if you are a developer that doesn't, let's say, have a particular color blindness, you might feel sympathetic towards someone that does, and you therefore produce an app that doesn't, you know, that caters for that color blindness. So sympathy is fine, but do you know what's better than sympathy? Empathy. That's the SFX budget completely blown. That's it. So while sympathy says I feel for you, empathy says I feel with you, which is essentially to say, to be empathetic, you have to understand why your users feel this way. Why are they asking this question? What was in their head? So let's take that same question. Will they get my order right? And now what we're going to do is step back in time, because this is an anxiety. This is not necessarily a question, this is an anxiety. What are the thoughts that led to this anxiety? Well, they could be this. You could be worried that actually I've had a bad experience before. This shop has messed up previously, and I'm worried that that's going to happen again. You might say, you know, it might be a question of life and death. I'm allergic to straw. If they make a mistake and they deliver a scarecrow that's made of straw through my door, then I could literally die. Or it could be something completely situational. Whilst I was ordering, I saw an error message and that worried me, and now I'm not totally sure whether that order's gone through or it's going to arrive exactly as I specified. And what is interesting is that each of these concerns have a different solution. So if you're worried about the fact that the shop has messed up, well, one example solution could be, well, if we have a packing list confirmation in the app, then you can see who's ticked off what's going to be delivered and what's inside the box. If you're allergic to straw, well, then maybe you want to see the quality control status. So see that somebody has said, yep, this scarecrow is made of, I don't know, chicken feathers or something like that. If you had an error message that worried you, well, then perhaps let's offer an order review and confirmation and next steps. See now that how we are empathizing with the user, that the solution is totally different. And one key thing about empathy is that to be empathetic, we are presenting data. We're presenting data so that we can communicate better with our users. So an empathetic answer, for example, we're not just going to tackle, will they get my order right? We're going to tackle the actual reason why the user asked that. They're allergic to straw. So okay, let's put a list of exactly what's going to be in the box that arrives at your house, and if there's no straw there, then you're going to be fine. I think that might be a problem in this particular case. So to summarize empathy, it often boils down to this. Sympathy is about trying to help the user. Empathy is about giving them enough information that they can help themselves. Okay. So now moving on to our next section, a quick demo. The next section is about progress. And there is a 10-second limit with progress. The advice now is more or less the same as it was 32 years ago. I made you watch a progress bar there for 10 seconds, and I would bet you that many of you, before even the 10 seconds came up, got either slightly bored or slightly anxious or whatever it may be. But the prevailing advice is that 10 seconds is your limit. For longer delays, you should give feedback about how long you expect something to take. And that is a quote from 32 years ago, from 1993, from Jacob Nielsen, who is a UX expert. And by the way, his paper that he published references a paper from 1968 that says exactly the same thing. That is the oldest quote that I've ever had in any of my talks. But it's kind of nice, I don't know, it's kind of satisfying to find something that is so immutable in our ever-changing industry. The advice, give them 10 seconds. If you take more than 10 seconds, then you need to be telling them what, you need to be giving information on how long something is going to take. So kind of rule one of progress bars is, if you can indicate to the user how long something is going to take, then do so. Another sort of psychological trick that we can use is that a progress bar feels faster if it goes slow, 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 fast, as opposed to fast, slow, 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 even if those two things actually take the same amount of time. And that's a fairly easy thing to do with the right easing function, particularly if you know how long something's going to take. How about progress in the background? Well, we use notifications for that. So here's one. This is not new. This is showing a progress bar. And it's good empathy because we're showing progress for that ongoing task without forcing the user to keep checking the app. This has existed, this functionality has existed since Android 4, since Ice Cream Sandwich. It's all quite straightforward, don't fear. We're going to build on this right up to the latest features of Android 16. So we're going to show some code now. I appreciate that probably most of the people in the room here have done this 10 times already this week, but just for completeness, let's talk about setting up the channel so that we can send notification. So a channel is a categorization of your notification. Essentially, users can apply different sounds and styles to it. And we do this like so. We create an instance of notification channel, and we use create notification channel on the system service that we got on that top line there, the system notification service. Once we've created that channel, we can create the basic ongoing notification. We do this with a notification builder. I'm using, obviously, notification compat, so it can be backward compatible. But that allows us to set a small icon and a large icon. And it allows us to set ongoing to true. That means it's an ongoing notification, which is essentially an indication that the app is performing a background task. the user is probably actively engaged in it, sort of requires their continued attention. It's going to be a persistent notification. Up until recently, like recent versions of Android, that isn't a notification that could ever be swiped away. We are also going to set it to silent, because our mechanism for updating that progress bar is going to be to put a notification on top of it with the same ID. And if we're not silent, then every time that notification updates, your phone is going to go ding, 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 ding. So at least on subsequent notifications, we're going to set silent to true, even if not on the very first one. We give it a title, building your scarecrow, and we set the progress. The first argument there, that 100, is the maximum progress, and then the second argument is the progress so far. And we're going to build it. And then we send it to the notification manager, and that then appears on the user's screen. We make sure that we use the ID of the existing notification so that when we update the progress bar, it replaces what was there before as opposed to post new ones over and over and over again. But we can be better than that. We can be more empathetic. We can provide more data. This isn't about keeping the user entertained. It's about reducing anxiety. So, as the progress bar progresses, we can change the title, and we can set some text to say exactly what's happening as this scarecrow is being built. Still Android 12, still old stuff, still something that's been available for a little while. Yeah, we can set those titles. But we can see also that as the notification progressed, there were different kind of stages to it. There were different checkpoints. The first checkpoint is when we finished receiving the order, and now we're going to choose the clothes. The second one is, well, we finished choosing the clothes, and now we're on to stuffing this scarecrow. Finished stuffing, on to accessorizing, et cetera, et cetera. This is where we need a progress-style notification, and this is where the new stuff that has just been released with Android 16 comes in. This is what it looks like. So you can see now that we've got those squares running across the progress bar to show where the checkpoints are. And to do that, we have a progress style. It's a progress style notification. We create an instance of progress style, and we set up the progress points. Progress points are a list of those points, the places where they are, so that constructor takes an argument of where it is within the 100%, and sets a color for each one, different color. And now that we're using a progress style notification, we are moving the progress from the base notification into this progress style instance. So now we set progress to % complete, is expecting a number out of 100 now. So now when we use the notification builder that I showed you previously, we are no longer setting the progress there, but instead we're setting the style to be that progress style instance that we created on the last slide. By the way, I'm going to share resources for the talk at the very end, and there's a GitHub example with all of this and everything else that I'm talking about. And we build it, and we send it just like before. Now, bad news. There's been a nuclear incident in the Scarecrow stuffing department, which means that stuffing is going to take longer than expected. Well, we are empathetic designers, so we give the user that data. Time for progress segments. So this is a little bit difficult to see, but what you've got there is a progress bar, some of which is blue, and then it turns to red where we are expecting a delay, and then it goes back to blue again. So the user can understand, can appreciate that something that is upcoming is not going to be as you expected. It's going to be, it's going to be a little bit slower. And the way we do that is within this progress style instance, we set the progress segments and their colors here. Now, by the way, the constructor here takes the length of the progress segment, not where it is. the length of the progress segment. So that first one is 30 percentage points wide, the second one is 20, and the last one is 50. And we set the colors for them. Now the user is expecting something to go a little bit wrong, expecting something difficult, so they are going to be less anxious when it comes to the actual delay. Another thing that we can do is say exactly what's progressing. I don't think that's necessarily very helpful in a Scarecrow building app, but we can set the thumbnail that goes along the progress bar. That would be useful for something like where you're tracking progress across different modes of transport. So you could show, someone on a scooter, and then on a bus, and then on a train. And we do that by, again, we're using the progress style instance, and we are setting the tracker icon, and we're setting it to an icon that, I'm sure you know how to create icons. You do this every day. One further thing that we can do, modern versions of Android still, is set notification chips. So that is a little bit of text that appears in the app status bar, and it is only for when the app is in the background. There's a recommended limit of 7 characters. It works quite nicely with changing the icon as well. So if you're creating a navigation app, for example, you can say turn left and have a left-pointing arrow. You can also change the background color. I've not been successful in doing that. There is a set color method. Doesn't seem to do anything, but I think it's because it only works if you're a foreground service. It could be that there's a bug there in the current version of Android X. Note, by the way, as it progresses, there is no text for the word accessories, that particular stage. And that's because accessories is too long. So the app prefers to show absolutely nothing at all. So the system is quite particular about what it's allowed to show there. So after close, it goes to stuffing, and then it goes to nothing at all. So recommended limit of 7 characters. You can push that a little bit, but if you push it too much, you're just going to get nothing. To set the critical text, your notification needs to be a promoted ongoing notification. So in our notification compat builder, oh, by the way, we set the text to set short critical text, but we do it on a promoted notification. So the promoted one is like the topmost notification. We have to request to be that. The system might not grant it. You don't find out whether or not it does. I don't think there's any way of knowing. But you have to request that. And if you are the promoted one, then you're the one that gets to put a chip in that status bar. In order to request promoted ongoing notification, you have to have the permission post-promoted notifications. That's a manifest permission. You don't need to ask the user for it, but it needs to be there. OK. What about the worst case scenario of a long-running task if we don't know its completion time? Well, I don't know if you've played with the Androidify app, the one that allows you to sort of take a selfie and it turns you into an Android robot. I think that had a good example of a progress bar that takes a while, but you don't necessarily know, the app doesn't know how long it's going to take or even how far through the process it is at any one point, because it's just basically waiting on a server to get back to it. That progress line, by the way, keeps looping around. It looks like it's deterministic, but it's not. It's an indeterminate progress bar. So why is this empathetic? The extra data it's giving isn't actually helpful. It says it's spray painting this robot. It's not really spray painting a robot. It's just there for humor. But the information that it's giving is sort of subtler than that. It's saying that it's normal to be waiting this long and nothing has gone wrong. So the user is sort of entertained and happy to be there and less anxious over the fact that it's taking a little while. So that kind of style things, I've seen that in other apps as well. I think that's an effective way of keeping the user comfortable and confident and trusting of the app. OK. On to the next section of empathetic animations. The first thing I should say is this looks like a small, almost trivial detail, animations. It is not. It in fact gets right to the heart of what empathetic UX is. That is small details that solve real-world anxieties. Let's take this. So here is a page in our app. User has just got to this page. Your screen changes, and this is displayed. How do they get here? What does that page relate to? Now, we're all technical people, and generally we don't have this problem, but this is a problem that I promise you your users will have, particularly the less technical ones. People get worried when the phone changes, when something changes, and they don't know why that happened. What did I do to get here? And take a step back in time. The thought behind it is, did I just mistap something? Or is it even worse than that? Did I accidentally change something? Have I screwed some stuff up for myself or somebody else? And animations can solve that. They can solve those kind of anxieties because they give immediate feedback linking what you did with what has just happened. So you can see the causal link, cause, effect. This is a shared element transition. You can see that the photo of the scarecrow in the list of scarecrows expands to fill the available space and becomes the photo in the detailed view, explaining about that scarecrow. Shared element because that image is the same as that image. They just grow and they become the same thing. Shared element transitions, relatively new to Compose. They're still in experimental. You need to surround your code with @experimental. But we need the animation library from Android X Compose animation to include them. Here is my nav host for that particular app. There are two composables in it. There is a Scarecrow list screen and a Scarecrow details screen. In order for us to be able to transition from one to the other by sharing this element, there needs to be a common ancestor between those two composables. And that common ancestor is a shared transition layout. That gives us a couple of things. One of the most important things it gives us is a composable shared transition scope. So the content argument to shared transition layout, basically what goes after your inside your curly braces after that, has a shared transition scope receiver. We will need that later, bear that in mind. So what we will do is we will pass that scope that we've received into our composables like this. So we will take shared transition scope, pass it into the list screen, pass it into the detail screen. We will use that later, keep that in your mind. Here is somewhere deep within either of those screens, either the detail screen or the list screen, we are going to have an image of this scarecrow. And in order to add that image to the shared transition, then what we're going to do is tell the system that they are the same thing. We do that by sharing the same key. As long as we put the same key on each of those images, the animation library is going to know what to do with it. We also need to explain to the animation library where those elements are going to be during the transition, because the screens may zip in and out or come in different directions. It needs to know where it is on the screen at any one time. And the animated visibility scope does that. Keep that one in mind. That's a separate thing to what we had before. I know they're named slightly similarly. The one we had before was that shared transition scope, and the shared element modifier that I'm showing there is only defined within a shared transition scope. So we surround that with a with. I appreciate that this, the slides can only show a certain amount of lines, and what we got is little pieces here that I'm trying to piece together in your heads. But really, what I would suggest is you go and look at the resources that I put at the last slide. So animated visibility scope, we need that one too. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from, if we look at the code behind composable within our nav graph builder, actually there is a receiver that gives us an animated content scope. That is the argument that we need. So again, we need to pass that into the screen that we've defined in our nav graph as this at composable. It's a slightly weird kind of syntax that, because composable is a function, not a thing that necessarily has a this, but the reason is it's a function that's defined in a particular scope, so it has a receivable, so that this kind of makes sense. Just looks a bit odd. We end up with this. So the image grows in size and fills the available space there. We get immediate feedback linking what you did with what's just happened. Last thing that I would like to talk about is going offline. Now, we as developers are really bad at this. I've been on a number of planes recently, and the number of apps, even from really big vendors, really big apps, that get this wrong is quite astonishing, really. There are apps that definitely have the data that I want, definitely have it cached, but won't give it to me just because it can't talk to a server here or there or whatever, and it can't check in with something. There are apps that consider you to be offline, consider you to have been logged out if you are in fact offline. So I urge us to be better at this. So let's look at this same sort of diagram as before. Let's take a user concern. Does this app support offline working? Now, take a step back in time, understand why they are asking this question, why they have this anxiety, what are the questions that lead to it. It might be, I'm worried I'm going to lose my work. It might be, I need access to my data whilst I'm going to go offline. It might be something, again, that's totally situational. So I'm roaming, and data is expensive here, so I just want to use as little of it as possible. And again, now that we are trying to be empathetic with this user, we come up with different answers to each of these different questions. So if you're worried you're going to lose your work, well then make sure that the app makes clear that what it's doing is writing to the cache and then syncing later when it can. If you need access to the data, the person that needs access to the data whilst they're going to be offline, download content for later use. By the way, being offline, I've given the example of being on a plane there, and that is an example, obviously, of a place where you're not getting internet access. But I come from London, and I know some places in the center of London where it is impossible to get a signal. It's not just places where it's obviously offline. Connections come and go, even in big cities. Data is expensive here. Well, let's just make sure that the app caches as much as possible and uses that cache whenever it can. An example of an app that gets this stuff right is Google Docs. I think Google Docs does this really well, and we can take a little bit of their example and use it for ourselves. So when we are online, we get a little cloud with a tick. Everything's good. When we make changes to our document, it says saving, and then quite quickly goes to save to drive. Everything is good. When we are offline, we have a little thing that says working offline. That's not an error. There's no big red crosses through that. That's a normal state of the app. There's no problem here. We're just working offline. And you'll find that if you start typing text, it still saves. Saving, 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 saving. Save to this computer. So we're good. And after it's saved to the device, and then you've connected back to the internet, back to save to drive. So what I want you to get from that is we, as developers, need to stop treating offline as an error. It's anxiety-inducing, and it doesn't need to be. We just need to be better at dealing with offline. We need to think, you can do that later, rather than, you can't do that now. And that's pretty much it. So what we looked at is how to think empathetically. And again, I want this to be the #1 takeaway. I want the thought process behind empathetic thinking to be what you take away from this talk. Understand how to talk to your users, how to understand what's in their heads. Question why they have the anxieties. Don't just look at the anxieties and think sympathetically. Question why they have those anxieties. Understand that the way of solving those anxieties is presenting the data to people and allowing them to serve themselves. We looked at 3 empathetic improvements. We looked at how to present progress. We looked at, particularly the new progress-style notifications in Android 16. We looked at how animations can help users understand their own actions and what the app is doing, so there isn't a concern about when the app is changing, like pulling the rug from under them. And a final takeaway is to treat offline as a normal state, not as an error. Here are the materials. I put a sort of GitHub README there with a full list of things, including that paper from 1968. And otherwise, please do feel free to connect with me. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it very much.